Hello, I'm Beth Joey. This is a video. These are some books. Let's get into it. Realmathon has shifted from April to March this year, and I could not be more excited that it's even closer than it was last year, and I cannot wait to get stuck straight into the readathon. If you don't already know, this is a month-long readathon hosted throughout March by Cassidy over at Covers with Cassidy. I'll put her announcement video in the description down below so that you can sign up, join in all the fun. But the purpose of this video is to run through my potential TBR/ options for the readathon, because I have no idea what I'm going to read, but I do want to gain as many points for my realm as possible, defeat other realms as we're supposed to be doing. So I put together a list of 20 books that meet my options for bonus points prompts, and we're going to run through all of those books now and potentially figure out what I might be reading in Realmathon this year. So the first book is Cruel King by Rina Kent. This is the sort of prequel in the Royal Elite series by this author. It's a series of dark romances set in a high school setting with some very dysfunctional and borderline violent men and the women that they fall in love with. So this one follows Levi King, who is the older brother of the guy in the first book whose name that I can't remember, and his romance and falling in love with Astrid. In the beginning of the Royal Elite series, these two are already together, but in this book, it's telling the story of how they got together. They're from these two warring families, so it's very much Romeo and Juliet. For some reason in all of these books, the guy is always going after the girl in a very aggressive way and not necessarily in a romantic way, so I'm guessing that's what's going to be happening in this book, and I can't wait for it. Next up, we have The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I read The Silent Patient by this author, and whilst I found it thrilling and interesting, I didn't really love the book, but I did want to give this author another go because my edition of the book has a black cover, and it's part of my shadow realm to read books with black covers. So this one follows a girl named Mariana who's convinced that the professor and lead of this women's society called the Maidens is murdering them all, essentially. And so she begins to hunt him down. Her obsession with proving that he's the one who committed these crimes grows out of control. There's a sort of Greek mythology element coming into this story, and of course it's very dark academia because it's set at a university. I think it's set at Cambridge. So it should be an interesting mystery thriller. Next up, we have Vacation Wars by Meghan Quinn. This one, it has a building on the cover, which is another one of my sort of bonus prompts as part of the Shadow Realm. So this one follows a girl named Tessa who made a deal with her sister in high school that she had to fall in love before her sister got married, and it's coming up to the day that her sister's getting married, and her sister is coming to her saying, hey, what about that deal we made? So Tessa has to start to dodge suitors and pranks as she bumps into Miles, who is her childhood crush, who is dealing with family difficulties of his own because his father won't take him seriously in his own business endeavors. So these two kind of work together to sort out their family antics and presumably fall in love along the way. Next up, we have Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper. This follows our main character, Emmy Harlow, who sort of self-exiled herself from her town as a result of multiple things, one of those things being a horrific breakup with Gareth Blackmore. But then there's this sort of town community event that brings her back, and she bumps into two people, Lyndon and Talia, who have both just come off of an incredibly horrific breakup with Gareth, who also happens to be one of the founding families in the town, so power imbalance, because basically Gareth was dating them both and neither of them knew about it. So the three of them kind of work together to get some payback against him and against his family. But as it is a sapphic witchy romance, Talia and Emmy start to, you know, sparks fly between the two of them. Next up, we have So Not Meant to Be by Meghan Quinn, which is the second book in the Kane Brothers series, and I believe this is a take on a When Harry Met Sally kind of romance. It follows our main character who is forced to go on a work trip to San Francisco with a man named JP Kane, and she absolutely hates him because he's constantly pushing her buttons and winding her up. So they go on this trip, and I think they're forced to share a hotel room or share a living space, which is totally fine, except JP continues to push her buttons, JP continues to wind her up, and JP continues to flirt, and she is embroiled in this seductive temptation that is him, which she refuses to fall for. Next up, we have The Blonde Identity by Ali Carter, which I am so excited for. You would not believe. It sounds like such an interesting premise. It follows our main character, whose name I can't remember, who wakes up in a foreign location with some amnesia to a man leaning over her saying she needs to run. She ends up finding out that this man is a super secret spy, and her super secret twin sister that she didn't know she had was also a spy, but she can't remember who she is, so maybe she's the super secret twin sister, maybe she's the spy. These two people are kind of forced to work together to find out what's going on, why people are targeting her/her sister, trying to kill her, and of course, it's a romance, so they fall in love along the way. Next up, we have To Bleed a Crystal Bloom by Sarah A. Parker, and all I really know about this is that it is a Rapunzel retelling about a woman whose entire community, I think, was massacred, and then so she was brought in by this kingdom and protected and kept close, told never to leave, you know, kind of like the tower in Rapunzel, and then this man seems to come into her life and challenge everything, you know, rip up all her roots and throw her world around. Next up, we have One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, which is the first book in the Shepherd King duology, and I'm gonna read you the blurb because no matter how many times I read it, I just cannot get my head around it. And it says, Elspeth needs a monster. The monster might be her. Elspeth Spindle, which is so hard to say, needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, mist-locked kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. She calls him the Nightmare, an ancient mercurial spirit trapped in her head. He protects her, he keeps her secrets, but nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, her life takes a drastic turn. Thrust into a world of shadow and deception, she joins a dangerous quest to cure Blunder from the dark magic infecting it. And the highwayman, he just so happens to be the king's nephew, captain of the most dangerous men in Blunder, and guilty of high treason. Together they must gather 12 Providence cards, the keys to the cure. But as the stakes heighten and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secret yet. The Nightmare is slowly taking over her mind, and she might not be able to stop him. Next up, we have The Awakening by Susan Valenti and Caroline Peckham, which is the first book in the Zodiac Academy series. I have technically read this before, but I want to give this series another go because I've heard 1,000,001 people and their mothers say that once you get to like the 3rd to 5th book, this series just kicks off and it's amazing. So it follows these two twin sisters who are Gemini. So they're twins born in the month or the year or whatever of Gemini, which apparently makes them incredibly, incredibly powerful. They had no idea about this. And they're brought into this kind of magical school environment where there are these 4 guys who kind of run the place. They are the 4 heirs, and these 2 women challenge them. So naturally, it's a whole power dynamic thing, fighting over who gets to take over control. It is incredibly dark bully romance. I think the first and even second book are like 99% bullying, maybe 1% affection and romance. So it's definitely not something to go into lightly. It's definitely something that I would recommend checking out the trigger warnings if you haven't read it, because it was a lot, and that was a big part of why I put the first book down, because I was like, where is the romance? This is all bullying and torture. I'm not about this. I can't believe these are the men that they're gonna fall in love with. There is a teacher-student romance, there is bullying romances. It's a whole messy, messy good time, and I'm looking forward to trying the series again. Next up, we have Savage Lands by Stacey Marie Brown. This follows our main character, who is sort of the ward of the king because her father was a very important general, and I think he passed away before the beginning of the book. And our main character kind of pulls off a Robin Hood kind of vibe. She steals from these trains that are passing between the Fae and the human lands in order to bring the supplies being sent to the Fae lands to the black market so that the people who need them can actually access them, because they're exorbitantly expensive and she wants to help her people. Except one day while she's doing this, she gets captured and brought to the sort of infamous, deathly, gang, horrific prison system, and she meets this sort of acclaimed and mysterious hero called Warwick Farkas, I think his name is. I could be wrong on that front. And they plot to overthrow the world, I'm assuming. Next up, we have Gild by Raven Kennedy, which is going to be a reread for me, but I want to reread it because I just bought Gold, which is the 5th book in this series, I think, and the second to last one. So I want to reread the whole series before I then go into the 5th and 6th, because I don't remember a lot of what this was about. But basically, Gild follows Orin, who is a completely gold woman except for the whites of her eyes and the pearls of her teeth. This book is kind of inspired by King Midas because basically she is kept in captivity by King Midas, treated as one of his saddles. Let's not talk about what that means. Seriously, look it up if you're interested, but it is horrific. And she thinks of herself as the king's favored. She thinks she's got this perfect situation, this beautiful romance with King Midas, until one day he's trying to strike up a deal with another kingdom and they put her into the deal, and King Midas agrees to it, and she realizes that she's not as important as she originally thought, so she's shipped off to this other kingdom, and everything kicks off from there when her traveling party gets hijacked along the way and she meets the sort of dark shadow prince that isn't everything that the kingdom has purporting him to be. Next up, we have The Scarlet Veil by Shelby Mahurin, which is a spin-off of the Serpent and Dove series. This one follows one of the characters in the Serpent and Dove series. I think her name was Sealy, and she was the sort of character who everybody underestimated because she was young, innocent, and didn't seem to really understand the horrors of the world. At the end of that series, she is engaged to, I think, the captain of the witch army, whatever it's called, and she is one of of the witch army, one of the first female members of this army. And by witch army, I mean the people who used to hunt witches, not actual witches themselves. And she thinks everything's going right in her life, but clearly something is missing, and I think she gets embroiled into some sort of kind of vampiric relationship situation, and I'm super keen for it. As you can tell, I know nothing about it because I don't want to know, because I went into Serpent and Dove not knowing anything and loved it, so that's how I'm going into this one. Next up, we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts, which is the first book in the Powerless trilogy. Again, I'm gonna read you the blurb because I don't really know what's going on. She is the very thing he spent his whole life hunting. He is the very thing she spent her whole life pretending to be. Only the extraordinary belong in the kingdom of Ilya. The exceptional, the empowered, the elites. The powers these elites have possessed for decades were graciously gifted to them by the plague, though not all were fortunate enough to both survive the sickness and reap the reward. Those born ordinary are just that. Ordinary. And when the king decreed that all ordinaries be banished in order to preserve his elite society, lacking in ability suddenly became a crime, making Payden Grey a felon by fate and a thief by necessity. Serving in the slums as an ordinary is no simple task, and Payden knows this better than most. Having been trained by her father to be overtly observant since she was a child, Payden poses as a psychic in the crowded city, blending in with the elites as best she can in order to stay alive and out of trouble. Easier said than done. When Payden unsuspectingly saves one of Ilyas's princes, she finds herself thrown into the purging trails. The brutal competition exists to showcase the elite's powers, the very thing Payden lacks. If the trials and the opponents within them don't kill her, the prince she's fighting feelings for certainly will, if he discovers what she is, completely ordinary. I'm intrigued. Apparently everybody's been raving about how amazing this book is, and I'm looking forward to cracking into it. Next up, we have Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa, which I think is the first book in the Bargainer series, and it follows a young woman, I think her name's Callie or something, and she has this circlet of beads winding up her arm, magical IOUs, because basically everyone in this world knows that if you need a favor, if you need something done, then you go to the Bargainer, and for every bargain he strikes, he gives you a bead, which will one day result in either you fulfilling your repayment of that deed or death. Except somehow Callie is the exception to the Bargainer's rule that he only really makes one deal with each person, because she's got this string of beads going all the way up her arm. She's got so many deals with this man, and everything's going fine until one day the Bargainer comes to collect. Next up, we have Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. This follows a woman who witnesses the horrific murder and mutilation of her sister, and in order to take revenge against whoever did this and find out who did this, she accidentally summons one of the princes of death, I think they're called, and binds this prince to her and forces him to help her solve this murder, only to find out maybe that he's more involved in it than she originally thought. It's a witchy enemies to lovers kind of romance. I have actually read this book before, but I do want to read it before going into the next two, and I could not be more excited. Next up, we have Sleep Like Death by Kalynn Bayron. This is another book by this author that's kind of a fairy tale retelling twisted on its head, and this one is Snow White twisted on its head. So the blurb says, "Only the truly desperate and foolish seek out the night. An ancient monster who twists wishes into curses. Eve knows this firsthand. One of her mothers was cursed by the night and trapped in the body of a songbird. With the unique abilities to communicate with animals and conjure weapons from nature, Eve has trained all her life to defeat him. With more and more villagers harmed by the night's corrupt deals, Eve believes she's finally ready to face him. But when Queen Regina begins acting strangely, talking to seemingly no one, isolating herself, and lashing out at the slightest provocation, Eve must question if her powers are enough to save her family and her kingdom." I just want to know where the poison apple's coming into this, because there's no mention of it in there. Then we've got Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and as for what this one is about, again, I'm going to read you the blurb, and it says, "Welcome to Charon's Crossing. The tea is hot, the scones are fresh, and the dead are just passing through. When a reaper comes to collect Wallace from his own funeral, Wallace begins to suspect he might be dead. And when Hugo, the owner of a peculiar tea shop, promises to help him cross over, Wallace decides he's definitely dead. But even in death, he's not ready to abandon the life he barely lived. So when Wallace is given 1 week to cross over, he sets about living a lifetime in 7 days. Hilarious, haunting, and kind, Under the Whispering Door is an uplifting story about a life spent at the office and a death spent building a home." I love that. Gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. My camera died, so I'm back with new camera battery. Hopefully we make it to the end of this video. I've got 3 books left. The first is Lighthouse Witches by CJ Cooke. I'm gonna read you the blurb. It says, "Two sisters go missing on a remote Scottish island. 20 years later, one is found, but she's still the same age as when she disappeared. The secrets of witches have reached across the centuries in this chilling gothic thriller from the author of the acclaimed The Nesting. I think it sounds super eerie, super witchy, obviously, and I'm keen. Then we have Lightlark by Alex Aster, which says, welcome to the Centennial. Every 100 years, the island of Lightlark appears to host the Centennial, a deadly game that only the rulers of 6 realms are invited to play. The invitation is a summons, a call to embrace victory and ruin, baubles and blood. The Centennial offers the 6 rulers one final chance to break the curses that have plagued their realms for centuries. Each ruler has something to hide. Each realm's curse is uniquely wicked. To destroy the curses, one ruler must die. Isla Crown is the young ruler of Wildling, a realm of temptresses cursed to kill anyone they fall in love with. They are feared and despised, and are counting on Isla to end their suffering by succeeding at the Centennial. To survive, Isla must lie, cheat, and betray, even as love complicates everything. And then finally, we've got Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver, which all I know about it is that it is a dark romance where 2 serial killers fall in love with each other, and it has got the craziest trigger warnings at the beginning of the book. I watched a TikTok that's like listed all of the trigger warnings, and it was just manic and insane, and apparently it wasn't as bad as the trigger warning suggested it would be in terms of gruesomeness, but dark romance about 2 serial killers falling in love with each other. That sounds intriguing. So those are the 20 books that meet either one or both of my 2 main prompts as part of the Shadow Realm, having black on the cover or being mostly black on the cover and having a building on the cover. I may read all of these books, I may read some of these books, I may read none of these books, which is highly unlikely. There will be a couple of these books at least that I pick up during the month of March, but either way, I'm super excited as always for Realmathon to come back again. It is the first readathon I ever took part in ever since I joined BookTube, and I'm just really keen for it. So let me know in the comments down below if you're going to be joining Realmathon in the month of March and what realm you're going to be a part of. Obviously the Shadow Realm has my particular bias, but do let me know what you're going to be joining, what you're looking forward to reading. I really love talking to you guys, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It's a super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!